I always get nostalgic around this time of year between the lights and the memories of Christmases gone by, but especially because it was on the first Sunday in December, 19 years ago, that Megan and I moved to West Point to pastor the church where we're at right now. And we remember singing the song, "It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year," as we traveled to get there. And we sang that because we meant it, but we also sang that because it was like ironic to think about all that we were doing. We were traveling halfway across the country. The weather was not the best. We had everything we owned shoved into a Ryder moving van. And we were shoved in as well with stuff behind our heads and on the sides of us as we traveled. Our car strapped to the back. Traveling up and down some of the mountains was a little bit of an adventure, and it took us some time to cover the distance. We had to, well, it took a lot longer than I thought it would, to be honest, because we stopped to visit with some family along the way that we hadn't seen for a while and celebrate some of the holiday traditions we had with them. We had to stop because we had a dog with us, and dogs take some care. They're not just going to sit in the car the whole time. And we had took a lot longer, really, because Megan was pregnant with our firstborn. She was 7 months along, which meant on doctor's orders we would drive no more than 60 minutes at a time without her having to stop and get out and walk for 20 minutes, because Ryder moving vans are not designed for pregnant women. And so my wife was kind of squeezed in to everything. She was squeezed into the seat with the dog on one side and the stuff on the other with the door right there. She was squeezed into her clothes. The seatbelt barely made it around her belly. Her bladder always made sure she knew that it was being squeezed. And we stopped and we walked, and she went to the restroom and we hydrated, and that journey just seemed to take forever. And it was the most wonderful time of the year as we got squeezed by all of that stuff and the pressure and the demands and the chaos that takes place when you're traveling that kind of distance. And I love that it happened on this first Sunday in December, because often that is also the time where we get to read the part of the story of Christmas where Joseph and Mary have to take a similar type of journey. They were a couple. She was pregnant. They were young and starting their life together, and they got squeezed on this cross-country trip that they had to take. Because Joseph was a descendant of King David, he had to go to Bethlehem in Judea, David's ancient home. He traveled there from the village of Nazareth in Galilee. He took with him Mary, to whom he was engaged, who was now expecting a child. And while they were there, the time came for her baby to be born. She gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no lodging available for them. As wild as Megan and I's travel was, I can hardly imagine what it would have been like to try and travel the distance they did on donkey and by foot, maybe at best with a cart, because while we had some places to stop, they had to carry whatever they needed with them. They had to go through wilderness, dirt paths, rocky soil, watching for bandits around the corner. And this whole trip was a squeeze on them. It was the most wonderful time of the year. It was a time for celebration. It was a time to be expecting this new child that was going to come, that they knew was the Messiah, which is why they were still together in the first place. And yet, all of these other factors were pushing their demands on them. Like they had to pay for this trip, and they had to pay for staying where they were going, and they had to pay to get back home. And all of that meant that they were going to be not days, but weeks away from Joseph's carpentry business. How does a young couple that already doesn't have much afford to go weeks without work, especially with a young baby on the way? They were squeezed by the powers that existed above them that they were subject to. powers like Rome, which made them go on this trip in the first place, because they had to get counted to make sure that they could get taxed appropriately, to be able to pay for the army that oppressed them. They were squeezed, literally like my wife was by this pregnancy. In Mary's belly, she carried the Savior of the world. But nobody else really knew that. Why would they expect or think that that would be what was taking place? And so instead, this was a couple that did not fit the mold of what was expected of a Jewish couple at the time Jesus was born. And so everybody needed to remind them of that by squeezing them socially, economically, around the dinner table, in the marketplace. They heard it through whispers. They heard it through people that would literally cross the street to avoid them like they were going to catch some disease. It made it harder to buy groceries where they may not be able to get what they want or maybe had to pay more in order to get it. And each and every action, even possibly being kept out of a room at the inn, was because they wanted to make sure that Mary and Joseph knew, because they were not doing what was expected of them, because they were not living up to the demands of the culture at the time, they should be feeling some shame. Sometimes, when we try to squeeze into what everyone else expects of us, we feel that squeeze. And that pressure can be overwhelming, like finding a place to give birth to a child when you are in your hometown and you don't even know where to go to find help and you have nowhere to stay. It can be squeezing and pressure when you try to fit into a mold of the demands of what everyone else has put on you, whether they know the whole truth about you or not. And instead of being the most wonderful time of the year, it can often feel more like chaos. It can feel more like pressure and demands. And I wonder if that's the case for you too. If this most wonderful time of the year, the time where there's celebrations and lights and activities going on everywhere, is really a time where all of the demands that get placed on you from other people and even from yourself just start to weigh down on you, and you feel it getting squeezed in tighter and tighter. And to me, it doesn't matter if these demands are good or bad. It doesn't matter if you like them or you hate them. They exist. Sometimes they come from your family that's expecting you to move that elf every single night and do something different. And over the years, those ideas become harder and harder to come by. It's the expectation that those Russian tea cookies are going to be waiting for them when they walk through the door to visit, no matter what you've been doing up to that point. Your Aunt Gertrude expects a visit on the second Tuesday of December. Whether you have any other plans or not, whether it's snowing or not, you better be there. It's expected of you. Sometimes it comes from work. I can imagine the hours and the expectations of those in the retail business right now. But I do know what it's like to be someplace where there's an end of the year crunch, where all of these things have to get done, and there's a hard deadline that it's got to get done by. And so you work, and you work, and you work, and you get up early, and you stay late, and your brain turns to mush to meet the demands placed on you. Even the groups that we belong to place demands on us to show up for Friendsgiving, to help out with this cleanup, to go to all of the kids' concerts and their friends' concerts, to show up for sporting events that still take place in December for some reason. Like our calendar at home is color-coded with the 4 of us on there to try and be able to keep track of everything. And this is one of those months where it just looks like a bag of Skittles exploded onto the calendar because the colors are everywhere and they're mixing, they're mashing, and it's exhausting is what it is. And the demands of other people will make you feel a certain way too, because they will demand that you feel the same way they do about things that are going on in the world. You look around the world and you see chaos taking place. You see injustice happening. You don't have to look far. You see disasters taking place. I have some friends in the Philippines who are dealing with flooding. And And I found out a couple weeks ago that there are teenagers and adults in my own town that do not get winter coats. And I wonder what has happened. And what kind of demand is placed on me when I'm confronted with those things? So why do we feel so squeezed right now when our calendars are so full with so many amazing, good things? It's because of the demands that are placed on us and our willingness to accept them. We do it for the same reason we do anything else. Those demands, no matter where they've come from, have ended up playing into who we think we are. They become part of our identity. And so we have to live up to our identity because we do out of who we are. So Mary and Joseph are in this unconventional relationship out of who they are, people of faith that God has met with and revealed what's happening. They're traveling because they're subjects to a Roman Empire that's telling them what to do. That's part of their identity, so that's what they do. For some of us, that means that you're the one that bakes 30 cakes in 30 days because that's who you are. You're the cake lady, and that's how you contribute to all your family and friends' lives. Or maybe that's because that's the only way you think they will like you. Your identity makes that decision. I had a friend who was born and grew up in Michigan, but always rooted for Ohio State, which if you are from that area, you know is not what you're supposed to do. But it was what his family had done for generations. And so if you were going to be part of that family, then you were going to root for Ohio State no matter where you lived, even if it was in Ann Arbor, Michigan, next to the Wolverines football facility. Because that's who you are if you're going to belong. And we can feel overwhelmed when these demands get put on us from without or from within, because they're squeezing us into an identity that we were never meant to carry. Whether it's your spouse, your friends, your kids, the society you live in, there are tons of people who are ready and willing to tell you who you should be. They're going to tell you how you should celebrate the holidays, what kind of Christmas presents you should expect, how you should decorate your house, what food you should put on the table, how you should feel about all of the different movies and everything else in the world. They're going to tell you how you should fill your calendar, how you should spend your money because of who you're supposed to be in their eyes. And you could be working and working and working to meet their expectations and their demands. And it could literally be killing you. I had a friend who was a teacher for a music department, and he did this to himself. His expectation for himself, his identity, was wrapped up in being the person that nobody could outwork. And so he put in more hours than anybody else, way more than was in his contract. He started groups that the school had never had before and filled them with students that required more of his time. And it got so full that his family didn't see him very much anymore. His friends didn't know who he was anymore because he was never around. He was simply working harder than everybody else. And he was going to keep doing that even if it killed him, up until the point where he had a mental and medical breakdown. His body literally stopped. His brain said, enough. And all of the demands showed up, and he had to deal with the fact that he was trying to be someone that he was not. He was never meant to be the one that worked harder than everybody else, and that be the core of who he was. There was something else that needed to be central to his identity, central that said, this is why I do what I do. This is how I decide what to say yes to and what to say no to. And it comes out of who I am. And to find that true identity, to deal with the demands that are placed on us and the chaos that swirls around us, we can only do that if we know whose we are. If we know whose we are, then we'll know who we are. Mary and Joseph knew this. They knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that more than anything else, they weren't a young, poor couple. They weren't subjects to Rome. They were loved and favored by God. That's why they were in this place they were in. So even though it looked chaotic, even though things were not going the way that we would have chosen for them to go, Mary and Joseph knew they were loved. That was who they were. And so if that's who they are, then they'll know how to act. They're going to cherry this baby. And they may be subject to an empire that was bigger than they could imagine. But they didn't belong to it. They belonged to the Prince of Peace and the Lord of Lords. They belonged to the Messiah, to the very one that they were holding in their arms, wrapped in cloth, the very one that they lay in a manger. And that same Prince offers us peace in this most wonderful time of the year. A peace that comes when we experience Him. And in doing that, we get to know who we really are. Because I don't care what your kids have called you. I don't care what your boss has said. I don't know what you say to yourself when you look in the mirror or when the lights go out at night. But your identity probably is not there. Your identity is found in Jesus Christ, who came that you might know that you are beloved. That more than anything else, that is your identity. You are loved by God, who loved you so much that He would leave heaven and enter into the neighborhood that He might give His life, that you might have life. You are favored by God. And it's not because of anything that you have done. You did not earn this. This is just who God is. And it's who you are because of that. Paul says that according to God, we are masterpieces, that God is working on creating in this world to do meaningful things for the kingdom of God, which means you are a person of purpose and a person of value. And the things that you're supposed to do may not be all of the things on your to-do list. They might not fit the demands that you've placed on yourself or that others have placed on you, but they will fit the things that God has equipped you for. They will fit the things that God has placed in front of you that said, this is for you to do. And guess what? He knows how much time you have in a day. So He's not going to give you something that's going to take more than 24 hours in a day. Although I am great at trying to fill my calendar with more than I can fit in it. But when we know who we are in Him, we can have peace. Because then I'm not trying to fit into the mold of who they want me to be. I'm not even trying to fit in the mold of who I think I should be or who I think I am. I am simply putting myself into the shape of the one who made me and created me in the first place. And He is shaping me into His grand masterpiece. That might not always be easy or comfortable. It might be put me in places where the journey is long and the accommodations are not the best. But if I know whose I am, I will know who I am. If I know who I am, I will know what to do, and I will not be squeezed into what somebody else is doing. Because both literally and figuratively at this time of year, you do not have to go to every party you're invited to. How do we make space to experience the Prince of Peace and know this identity? According to the psalmist, we are to be still and know that He is God. That's the hardest thing to do on a normal time, much less at a time like this. But to find places of stillness, to find places where we're intimately connecting with others who are loved of God, that we might know Him and each other better, to create Sabbath. It is vital that we do this in order to be revived by God, in order to be reminded about who we are, and in order to say to the rest of the world, as I pause and I'm still and whatever is going on and swirling around me can continue to go on and swirl. But I know if I stop and rest, I will be reminded that it is not me who keeps the world spinning. It's Him. And He has come and told me that He loves me. And He's offered to give me peace, which in Hebrew is shalom, which means more than the kids aren't fighting over something dumb. It means wholeness. It means getting to be as you were meant to be. So maybe try that now. Take a deep breath. Let it out slowly. You need to even put something over your head. Put yourself in a room. Get away from it all for just a few minutes. And ask Jesus who He says you are. If you know whose you are, you'll know who you are. If you know who you are, you'll know what to do. And if you have some security in that, well, that kind of wholeness will give you peace in the most wonderful time of the year.